There are places steeped in memory, places where the pain and longing of the past have soaked so deeply into the earth that they have erased the boundary between what is and what was. It is precisely where life meets death that the veil of worlds becomes transparent. And these are not necessarily grand monuments to history, abandoned castles or mass graves. Sometimes it is just a quiet, forgotten corner, like Blackwood Cemetery.
To the casual eye, Blackwood is just another old graveyard. It rests on a gentle hill just outside a town that has largely forgotten it exists. Its iron gates, ornate but rusted, hang slightly askew. The tombstones, leaning like tired old men, are draped in ivy and softened by moss. The air here is different. It's still, heavy with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the faint, sweet perfume of wildflowers that grow untended among the stones.
Most people avoid it, especially after dusk. They speak of strange chills, of whispers on the wind that sound like their own names, of shadows that seem to move when you're not looking directly at them. They call it a haunted place, and they are right, but they don't understand the nature of the haunting.
Blackwood is not haunted by malevolent spirits or vengeful phantoms. It is guarded. It is protected. It is watched over by a single, solitary soul whose love for this place transcended even death itself. They call him the Graveyard Keeper, but his name was Silas Croft.
Silas was not a man of grand ambitions. He was born in the small cottage at the edge of the cemetery grounds, the same cottage his father, the keeper before him, was born in. The Croft family had tended to Blackwood for over a century. It wasn't just a job for them, it was a sacred trust.
As a boy, Silas learned the names on the stones before he learned the multiplication tables. He knew the stories of the people buried beneath the soil, the brave soldier who died too young, the beloved school teacher, the heartbroken lover, the family lost to a harsh winter. He saw them not as the dead, but as quiet neighbors who simply needed their rest looked after.
He took over as the official keeper when his father passed. Silas was a man of routine and quiet dedication. Tall and lean, with hands as gnarled as the roots of the ancient oak that stood at the cemetery's heart. His eyes were the color of a stormy sky, but they held a gentle, profound sadness. He had lost his own wife and young daughter to a fever decades ago. They were buried here, under a small, simple stone he carved himself. Perhaps that's why his duty felt so personal. He wasn't just guarding strangers, he was guarding his own family.
Every day for 50 years, his routine was the same. At dawn, he would walk the perimeter, checking for fallen branches or signs of disturbance. He would clear weeds from the markers, his rough fingers tracing the faded inscriptions with a familiar reverence. He would straighten flowers left by the rare visitor and speak softly to the residents, telling them the news of the town, assuring them they were not forgotten.
He was a silent fixture, a part of the landscape. The townspeople saw him as an eccentric recluse, a relic from a bygone era. They didn't understand his devotion. They didn't see the peace in his work. To Silas, Blackwood was not a place of death. It was a library of lives, a garden of memories. And he was its librarian, its gardener, its faithful guardian.
His end came on a wild autumn night. A storm, the likes of which the town hadn't seen in a generation, tore through the valley. Wind howled like a grieving beast, and rain fell in solid, icy sheets. While the townspeople shuttered their windows and huddled by their fires, Silas was out in the maelstrom. A massive, ancient branch from the central oak had cracked and was threatening to fall directly onto the grave of a child who had died only a week prior.
Armed with a rope and an axe, the old man fought against the gale. He was well into his 70s, but he worked with a desperate strength, trying to divert the branch's fall. The townsfolk later said he was mad to have gone out, but Silas couldn't bear the thought of that small, fresh grave being desecrated.
He never returned to his cottage. They found him the next morning at the base of the oak. The great branch lay beside him, its path diverted. The child's grave was untouched, but Silas Croft was gone, his heart having given out in the final, valiant effort. He had died protecting his flock.
But for Silas, it was not an end.
He remembered a great weariness, a final shuddering breath, and then silence. Not the silence of death, but the silence between heartbeats, between thoughts. He felt light. He opened his eyes, though he had no eyes to open, and saw the storm still raging around him. But he felt no wind, no rain. He saw his own body lying peacefully by the tree, and felt not horror, but a strange, distant pity for the tired old vessel he had left behind.
He was translucent, a shimmering outline of himself, woven from moonlight and memory. He saw the world differently now. The cemetery wasn't just earth and stone, it was alive with a soft, dormant light. From each grave, a gentle, silvery thread of energy pulsed, connecting the buried to the earth, to their own peaceful slumber.
He felt a new purpose settle over him, as natural and inevitable as his 50 years of service. His work wasn't finished. It had simply entered a new phase. His duty was no longer just to the stones, but to the souls themselves. The first test of his new existence came a few years later. The world had changed. The town had grown, and with it came a carelessness, a lack of respect for the old ways. One night,
The sound of raucous laughter and the clinking of bottles shattered the cemetery's peace. 3 teenagers, full of cheap liquor and foolish bravado, had broken in. They carried spray paint and a crowbar, intent on causing mindless destruction.
Silas watched them from the shadows of the great oak. A cold, unfamiliar anger stirred within his ethereal form. This was his sanctuary. These were his people. He would not allow this.
He didn't manifest as a terrifying specter. That was not his way. His methods were more subtle, more personal.
As one of the boys raised a can of spray paint towards a veteran's headstone, a sudden, inexplicable gust of wind snatched it from his hand, sending it clattering into the darkness. The boy stared at his empty fingers, confused.
Another, trying to pry a small angel statue from its base with the crowbar, felt the iron tool grow impossibly cold, so frigid it burned his skin. He dropped it with a cry of pain, shaking his hand, seeing no mark upon it.
The leader of the group laughed it off, calling his friends cowards. He took a step towards the Croft family plot, his own family's resting place. That was the final line.
Silas gathered the night's chill around him and whispered a single word on the wind. A name, the boy's grandmother's name.
The whisper was faint, seeming to come from all directions at once. The boy, Daniel, froze. He looked around wildly. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice trembling. His friends shook their heads, their own bravado gone, replaced by a primal fear.
Silas whispered again, this time with the sorrow of a disappointed ancestor. "What are you doing, child?" That was enough. The sound of their panic flight, crashing through the undergrowth, was the only sound that followed. They never returned. The graves remained untouched. Silas stood watch, the cold anger receding, replaced by a quiet, resolute calm. His first duty was to protect the sanctuary from the living. His second, more profound duty was to the dead.
Most souls in Blackwood rested peacefully. Their threads of light were steady, content. They were anchored to their memories and their place in the earth. But sometimes a new soul would arrive that was restless, a spirit torn from life too suddenly, confused, angry, or lost. Their light would flicker violently, and their thread would strain, threatening to break free from the peace of the ground. They would try to wander, to flee back into a world that was no longer theirs.
Silas learned to be a shepherd for these lost lambs.
He remembered a young woman, Ilara, who had died in a car accident. Her spirit thrashed with confusion and grief, refusing to accept her new reality. She drifted near the gates, her spectral form weeping, trying to push through the iron bars and return to her fiancé. Silas didn't restrain her with force. He approached her gently, his own light a calm, steady beacon. He didn't speak with words, but with feelings, with shared understanding. He showed her images of peace, of a sunset over the hills, of the quiet strength of the oak tree, of the deep, restful slumber of the earth. He projected a sense of belonging, of safety.
He reminded her that her love story was not erased, but had become a beautiful, complete memory, a story that was now part of Blackwood's great library.
Slowly, her frantic energy subsided. Her weeping softened. She looked at him with dawning comprehension, and then allowed her own light to settle, her thread to anchor firmly in the hallowed ground. She had found her peace. Silas was not a jailer, keeping souls imprisoned. He was a guide, helping them find their way home.
And so the seasons turn. Years blur into decades. The world outside the iron gates of Blackwood Cemetery rushes on, noisy and frantic. But inside, time moves differently. It is measured by the slow erosion of stone and the steady growth of moss. The townspeople still tell their stories. They don't know the truth of Silas Croft, the man. They only know the legend of the keeper. They say that on misty nights you can see a lone, hazy figure walking the paths. They say that if you listen closely, you can hear the faint sound of someone weeding a forgotten grave. They say that no matter how neglected the cemetery may seem, it never truly falls into ruin. There is a palpable peace there, a sense of being watched over, of being safe.
Sometimes a descendant of a long-buried resident will visit. A young woman might come to lay flowers on her great-great-grandmother's grave. As she stands there, lost in thought, a gentle breeze will rustle the leaves above her like a soft sigh. A single, perfect leaf might drift down and land on the stone before her. She'll smile, feeling a moment of connection she can't explain, a sense of comfort from a place of sorrow.
She won't see the translucent figure standing by the old oak tree, watching with his stormy sky eyes. She won't know that the breeze was a gentle gesture from a guardian who knew her great-great-grandmother's name, her story. A guardian who protects not just her ancestors' final rest, but the thread of memory that connects them both.
He is the silent witness, the shepherd of memories, the keeper of the quiet library of souls. He is Silas Croft, a man who loved his home so much, he never left. He remains, a timeless, tireless sentinel against the ravages of time and the carelessness of the living. A guardian who ensures that those who rest in Blackwood are not just dead and buried, but are eternally, peacefully at home.